So I recently read The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. It's book 1 of his Gentleman Bastard sequence. It's a high fantasy crime thriller that follows the adventures of the titular character, Locke Lamora, and his ragtag band of thieving friends, Gene Tannen, Kahlo and Galdo Stanza, and their apprentice Bug, throughout the streets of the fantasy city Camor. Now, in a lot of plot-heavy fantasy novels, I tend to notice authors fall into the pitfall of spending too much time developing their narrative and the world around their characters, instead of actually making their characters believable and likable. But Lynch actually avoided this pitfall in a very clever way, which allowed him to both maintain the action, drama, and absolute awesomeness of watching fantasy characters kick butt, while also maintaining really grounded and likable, understandable, and real characters by constructing his book through a sequence of chapters which take place in the present heist, and interludes which flash back to the Gentleman Bastard's days in training. Using this manipulation of setting, in particular time, Lynch is able to develop his characters in 3 distinct ways. 1, he establishes their values and belief system, which adds greater context to why they make the decisions they make in the present narrative. 2, he establishes the bonds and relationships between characters, which adds more believability and weight to the dynamic that Locke and his ragtag team of Gentleman Bastards have during the present-day heist. And finally, the one that becomes a little deus ex machina, especially during the end. Lynch uses his manipulation of time to establish his characters' skill sets and explain why they have certain abilities. While I believe that the other 2 methods of setting manipulation to build character add to the narrative, I actually think this 3rd edition kind of takes away, because Lynch writes himself into corners and then gets himself out of them by giving his characters random abilities that are never mentioned again, which isn't really fulfilling as a reader, but I digress. So the book begins as not an insignificant number due by introducing us to our main character, Locke Lamora, in the form of a flashback interlude to his training days under Father Chains. We see 8-year-old child orphan Locke pull a criminal stunt which results in several child deaths, the burning of the winery, and, more importantly, the attention of the Stadwatch. After this, he meets Father Chains, who agrees to take him in as an apprenticing Gentleman Bastard as long as he promises to study under him. In this conversation, Father Chains points out several of Locke's personality flaws, stating,
"My boy! My intermittently brilliant little boy! Your world has such small horizons. You can see clearly enough to pull a fast one on someone, but you can't see past the immediate consequences. Until you learn to think ahead of the repercussions, you are putting yourself and everyone around you in danger."
By developing these character flaws in an alternate setting, Lynch is then able to move back to the present and still tell a fetching adventure tale in which Locke can do nearly no wrong. When we switch back to present day, we see Locke's character growth as he's planning an exceedingly long con in which he uses the repercussions of it specifically to further his end goal. In this setup, he essentially convinces one of the noblemen of Camor that he's a famous wine salesman who will bring them great wealth if they invest in his business, but he knows that he doesn't have wine, so they will eventually see that he's not shipping it for them. So, he decides to dress up as one of the law enforcement agents in the city and tells them,
"That man is no more a merchant of Emberley than you or I, my Lord Salvara. He's a fraud, a sham." After some more conversation convincing by Locke, Salvara asks, "What am I to do then?" To which Locke responds, "Continue to act as though you are entirely taken in by Fairlight's story. Let him exchange the note, let him taste some success, and when he returns to you asking for Mother Liddy," "Yes," replies Salvara, "why, give it to him, my lord. Give him everything he asks."
Using manipulation of time to show past and present, Lynch develops Locke as a character and shows his character growth from the very beginning. We see Locke as a kid not able to understand the repercussions of his action. Then we flip to him as a middle-aged adult. We see him as a 20-year-old who is specifically using the repercussions of the holes in his wine con to further his long con through the hesitancy at birth. This character growth makes Locke seem incredibly believable as a character and likable as he can learn from his mistakes. It also establishes in the future that Locke is a very witty person who is exceedingly conscious of the effects that his actions have on others. We see another example of Locke's character growth around the same scene with Father Chains in the beginning, but this time he states,
In reference to the children Locke killed during the laundry burning, it is one thing to kill in a duel, to kill in self-defense, to kill for vengeance. It is another thing entirely to kill simply because you are careless. Those deaths are going to hang over your head until you're so careful you will make the saints of Halandra weep. Your death offer will be 1,000 full crowns per head, all of it properly stolen by your own hand. Skipping down the page a bit. It will take years, but we're thieves, not murderers. At the price of your life with me, you must show respect for the dead. Those boys and girls are your victims, Locke. Get that through your head. This is something you owe them before the gods. Something you must swear to do by blood before you can stay. Are you willing to do so?
Locke then joins the Gentleman Bastards under these conditions, showing that he does have a value for life and will put his own life at risk, or at least at a significant deficit, to make up for the loss of others' lives. This comes back again later in the present narrative, at the very end of the book, in which Locke finds out that the Grey King, his enemy in the present narrative, has set up several people to die at a party. Now, these noblemen attending the party had previously tried to kill Locke and were actively hunting for his head. When torturing answers out of a henchman of the Grey King, he states,
"So now you have your choice, Master Lamora. At false light, the man you want to kill more than anyone in the world will be briefly alone at the floating grave. At false light, 600 people at the top of Raven's Reach will suffer a fate worse than death. Your friend Jean looks to be in very poor health. I doubt he can help you with either task, so the decision's yours. I wish you the joy of it." Locke arose and tossed Jean his hatchet. "It's no decision at all. Gods damn you, Falconer, it's no decision at all." "You're going to Raven's Reach?" said Jean. "Of course I am."
Now, in most scenarios, it wouldn't make sense for a witty, smart person like Locke to put himself in harm's way to save people who wanted him dead. But because Lynch had previously established Locke's value for life through his manipulation of setting in the flashback, this makes a lot more sense and holds a lot more narrative weight, as we can understand that Locke truly is okay with risking his life and understands that he may die just to help these people. Locke himself even acknowledges this value of his when stating,
"Has it ever occurred to any of you," said Locke, crawling back to his feet, "to ask why I came all the way back to Raven's Reach when I'd already made it clean away?"
By manipulating time, Lynch makes the climax of his book a lot more engaging as we see Locke's personal stake and why he is personally invested in making sure these 600 some odd noblemen don't die. The second way Lynch uses manipulation of setting to build his characters is by establishing relationships between characters, which makes their bonds in the present more strong and believable. The most prevalent example of this is the dynamic between Jean and Locke. In a flashback, the book establishes that Locke, while he is a genius when it comes to planning schemes, doesn't really have the physical strength to fulfill them. It does this on page 346 when it states,
"You and I both know that you have multiple talents, Locke, genuine gifts for a great many things, so I have to give you this straight. If it comes down to hard talk with a real foe, you're nothing but a pair of piss breeches and a bloodstain. You can kill all right, that's the God's own truth, but you're just not made for stand-up face-to-face bruising. And you know it, right?"
Lynch further cements this when we have another flashback to the Gentleman Bastards before Jean joined the team, and we see them fighting another youth gang. These are the results.
Locke was the smallest child involved, even counting the girls, and while he went into the melee with his little fist swinging, he caught most of the air and was quickly knocked down. The Sanzas were capable brawlers, but even if Locke had been able to hold up his end of the fight, the numbers would have pulled against them. In the end, after a few minutes of wrestling and swearing and kicking, the three Gentleman Bastards were dumped into the middle of the alley, dusty and battered.
When Father Chains recruits Jean, an obvious bruiser type, Locke and Jean have this discussion regarding how they will combat the youth gang that fought them prior.
"Look, it's been a few days since we've had any piece of testo, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to lurk just south of the market tomorrow and look like I'm up to something. You're going to hide a long way off, 200 or 300 yards maybe, somewhere they can't possibly spot you." "I'll never get to you in time," said Jean. "The point isn't to get to me before I get beaten," said Locke. "The point is when you do get there, you pound the crap out of him. You beat him so hard they'll hear him screaming in Talisham, smack him around like you've never smacked him before." "With pleasure," said Jean.
Moving forward with the flashback, we see Locke confront the rival gang again and get beaten to a pulp when he delivers the following line.
"I don't have to fight you. I don't have to run. I just have to keep you here until Jean gets back."
This establishes a, presumably by the present day, practice dynamic between Jean and Locke, where Locke plans the schemes, but Jean provides the physical support to carry them out. This dynamic appears again throughout various parts of the present-day timeline, but most notably at the end when Locke is fighting the big bad, the Grey King, and states after also getting beaten to a pulp,
"I don't have to beat you," Locke whispered, grinning madly up at the Grey King, his face streaked with blood and tears, his nose broken and his lips cracked, his vision swimming and edged with blackness. "I don't have to beat you, Mother. I just have to keep you here until Jean shows up.
This scenario, however, subverts the relationship dynamic and provides an example to show Locke's character growth throughout the course of the book that wouldn't have otherwise been possible if the dynamic had not been first established by Lynch's setting manipulation. In the final fight, Locke actually is able to defeat the Grey King on his own, and Jean does not arrive until after the Grey King is dead and Locke has suffered substantial injuries. While Locke's victory against the Grey King proves that he does not need Jean's physical support to win his own battles anymore, his reference to Jean's help alludes to their ongoing friendship throughout the trials of this book, and suggests that he and Jean have still maintained an emotional bond and support system. This scene wouldn't have nearly been as impactful or a testament to the ongoing strength of Jean and Locke's relationship if Lynch had not manipulated time to give us the flashback and establish the previous dynamic between Jean and Locke. So the final way Lynch uses manipulation of setting to build his characters makes me really angry. Doesn't butter my biscuit, burns my biscuit actually. He uses his manipulation of setting to give his characters certain abilities. However, most of the time, these abilities are used once to advance the present narrative, but never mentioned again. The most egregious example of this is when he introduces, this far into the book, beginning of the book, where he introduces that Jean went to a death cult for a year during his gentleman bastard training. And the text states,
"That night, much to his surprise, he was confirmed as having passed the third inner mystery of Azagila."
So this indicates he was a pretty high-ranking official in this cult. Now you might ask, well, why did we get an entire flashback of Jean going to a death cult if it's not mentioned before and has no impact on his life throughout the book whatsoever? Well, it's because he needed a cool disguise. That's literally it. He needed to go undercover in the middle of this, party, and the Gentleman Bastards hangout spot had been burned. All their costumes had been burned by the Grey King. So he needed a new costume. And in the next chapter, the present chapter, the only other time the death cult becomes important, he visits a local branch of the death cult and uses his death cult knowledge to get the food, board, and costume. This is what the text has to say about that.
Yes, except for one small thing. Jean held up the silver mesh mask of a priest of Azagila. The aid and comfort of the Lady of the Long Silence. How the hell did you arrange that? Right after I dropped you off at the edge of the cauldron, said Jean, I decided to row back to the temple district and make myself useful. Skipping forward to Jean's retelling of how he got the mask. Praise the lady, brother. I do, I have, and I shall, said Jean. She has delivered me from our enemies. She has given me a second chance to fulfill my mission. I pray, take me to the steward of your temple. Let me meet with your father or mother divine. I need only a visage and robes and room for several nights while I put my affairs in order.
So did Lynch technically develop his character's skill set and abilities through his setting manipulation? Yes, he did. Did he do it well? No, he didn't. In all seriousness, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and I do applaud Lynch for his unconventional use of setting and time, which allows him to balance characters and narrative in a way not always effectively done in this genre. I truly believe that through his use of flashbacks, Lynch is able to add motivation and relationship context to his characters that wouldn't have otherwise existed in the same eloquent fashion. Lynch builds really compelling characters that are honestly the standout of the book. And he also does the abilities thing too, I guess. That's something he did.